Today we are going to compare three different AIs, Bard, ChatGPT 4, and Bing. We are going to see how each of them compared in productivity tasks. There will be three tasks, consist of planning, research, and calculation. For planning, I will use AI to generate a trip itinerary in Bangkok. Then for research, I will use AI to summarize blog posts, books, and give me the latest news. Then for calculation, I will use AI to solve math problems and maybe adapt the solution into code. So let's get started with our first task, planning. So we are here in Bard. I will have Bard give me a 3 days in Bangkok itinerary. And there it goes. So here's the response. We have a 3 days itinerary for Bangkok. And it separates into morning, afternoon, and evening of each day. And we have a disclaimer that this is just a suggestion and we should customize this to fit our time constraints. And we also have additional tips about what we should pack and which months or which season that we should visit Bangkok. So I would like to expand my trip duration in Bangkok from 3 days to 5 days. So I asked Bart to change it to 5 days. And it seems like Bart just got confused and gave me that 5 days weather forecast instead. I'm not sure if it's the prompt or if Bart just forgot the previous context, so I have to retype again. So I retyped with 5 days in Bangkok itinerary, and the response is pretty similar to the first one. So we have 5 days and we have morning, afternoon, and evening. But what seems to be missing is the additional tips. So back in the first response, we have additional tips, but it is not here in this one. Maybe Bart realized that it already gave us the additional tips, so it doesn't have to do it again. Then I asked Bart to add in the 3,000 baht budget to the plan and turn it into a table format. So in the table, we can see that we have each day and we have the cost. And Bart responds with 3,000 baht per day, even though in the table we can see the total of 2,100. So the text is misleading. It's not per day, it's for the entire trip. And it gave us a tips of how to stay in a budget. And since Bart said that it's 3,000 baht per day, so I asked it again that it's 3,000 baht for 5 days, but not like per day. And we have this new table instead. So this new table is separate in category instead, and we have the cost of each category. So you can see that we have accommodation, food, transportation, we have the total, and again we have the tips of how to stay on the budget. Now let's explore some other features that Bart provides. So you could export the response as a Google Docs, and with that, you could share it with your friends or download it as a PDF file. So you go to File, Download, and you could download as a PDF. You could share here, and you could add your friends or share it with anyone with a link, and you could copy the link to your friends. And you could also use your microphone instead of typing the prompt, and you can Google the related topics. Now I'm using ChatGPT 4. Let's use the same prompt. So 3 days in Bangkok itinerary. So here's the response from ChatGPT 4. It's more verbose than Bard, and it goes over the same 3 days trip. We have morning, lunch, afternoon, and dinner. It does give us a bit of a tips down here, but it's not like a list of tips as in Bard. And the places seem to be similar. It's like the usual big attractions in Bangkok, so it's pretty much the same. So here I tried to change the duration from 3 days to 5 days, like I did with Bart earlier. And ChatGPT does give me the right answer right away. With Bart, I had a bit of a struggle because Bart doesn't understand me and gave me a 5 days weather forecast instead. And with ChatGPT, I also add in a budget and I want a table format. Again, ChatGPT does understood me right away and gave me the table with the cost of each activity in each day and a bit of a tips as well. So I feel like with ChatGPT 4, I had less struggle trying to get the itinerary, and I can be flexible, and it does understand me right away. So with this, right now, it's better than BART. Let's switch over to Bing. So I'm going to type in the same prompt, 3 days in Bangkok itinerary. So with Bing, I'm using creative mode instead of balance or precise, because balance and precise will give us a link to other sites instead, while creative mode will be more talkative and look similar to BART and ChatGPT. And here's the response from Bing. It is different from ChatGPT and BART. It doesn't give us like what to do on the first day, second day. It's just a list of places that we should visit with a link to the site that we could see more information about each of these places. Like before, I tried to change to 5 days, and Bing said that it cannot do it, and that makes sense because the first response is not even an itinerary, so it cannot change to 5 days. It's just a list of places that I should visit. And I tried to add in a budget of 3,000 baht, and I want a table format. And Bing thus gave me a 3,000 baht budget for 3 days because it's assumed that I talk about the first prompt. And it gave me a table of what it would cost. Before we move on, I want to show you that Bing can also export the response just like BART. So you could click on share here, or you could export as a PDF, text, and Word file. Alright, so here's the second task, research. I want to summarize a blog post, a book, and I want to get the latest news. So here I have an awesome blog post about JavaScript event loop. And I want to learn more about this, but it's a bit too long. So I will head over to BART and tell BART to summarize the blog post for me. And here's the summarized version by BART. It gave me a key takeaways from the article. It is short, but it feels like it takes away too much from the original article. And for me, I feel like I still have to go and read the original ones to understand the event loop. Let's move on to book. So I have BART summarize the Hobbit book for me. It also gives 4 sources. You could click through each source to see which part of the summary takes from which sites. And there are sources down below. You could Google the related topics. And you could change the drafts. There will be 3 drafts that you could select from. And you can click to regenerate to get 3 new sets of drafts. And you can export as a Google Docs. So I can see that this would be very helpful for a student that needs to summarize a book and they need to export it into a Google Docs. They can try to regenerate to get the drafts that they like, and they can change it in Google Docs. So for the last test, I asked BART for today's news, and I checked on the result. It's not exactly the latest news, even though that it say that they are from May 20, 2023. It's not. You can see the first one here. It's from June 27th. And this one is from April 1st and May 6th. So these are not the news from May 20, 2023. Here we are in ChatGPT 4. I'm using the default model, and it can summarize the blog post, even though it say that it cannot follow links. And I think the summary is better than BART. And ChatGPT 4 does have access to the internet now, and it can also install plugins, and I will try those 2 models after this one. And now I ask ChatGPT to summarize the Hobbit book. It does pretty well, and the Hobbit is an old book, so it can do it. If I ask ChatGPT to summarize a new book, I'm sure that it cannot do it since it doesn't have it in its data. I might need to use the ChatGPT that can access the internet, or maybe a plugin. So we'll see after this. One more thing, ChatGPT can regenerate the response, and if you were to compare the second one to the first one, they are quite similar. And I think Bard has the upper hand here, since Bard does give you 3 drafts, so it's 3 versions, and it can regenerate any number of times, while ChatGPT does limits you to 25 times in 3 hours for the ChatGPT 4. And for the last test, it's to get the latest news. With ChatGPT, it does not have access to the internet, so I need to use ChatGPT 4 for web browsing. ChatGPT 4 for web browsing and plugins can be enabled in the settings and in the beta features. Keep in mind that you have to have ChatGPT Plus to use these new features. So ChatGPT browsed Wikipedia and gave me this response. It does take a while to do so, and I'm sure if I were to use Google or Bing, I would get the answer much quicker. And the list here are events that happened on May this year, but not exactly what happened on May 21st of this year. So it is mixed. It is not today, but it's what happened this month. So let's try ChatGPT 4 plugins. ChatGPT Plus users can now access ChatGPT 4 plugins, and there are many numbers of plugins to use. And these are growing by the days, and I might do a separate videos just based on the popular plugins and how to use them. So you can enable these features in the settings. And for this video, I will use Mixer Box News to try to get the latest news from ChatGPT. Now when I ask for the news, the Mixer Box News will be used automatically. And here I got 9 stories that happened today. I can ask for more detail, and all these links can be clicked. Okay, so back in Bing. Here I have Bing summarized the same blog post, and what I think Bing does better here is to reference other articles. These articles are talking about relevant topics in the blog post that I gave to Bing, so it does give you more context on what's going on. The summary itself is fine. I think ChatGPT does a better job to summarize the blog post. And then I asked Bing to summarize the Hobbit book. This is the longest response, and I think this is the best one, just because of the reference. These sites will give you summary of many books, and you could browse them and try to get other book summaries as well. And for the news, I think Bing does the best just because it is optimized for search engine. And when I ask Bing for the news, this is the response that I get. I have some Bangkok posts here just because I live in Thailand. And I have some articles down here as well. So since I'm using the creative mode, I think the response will be better if you use the balance or the precise mode of Bing. So you could check that out yourself, but I'm sure that for searching the new stuff, Bing would be the best go-to. And for the final task, it's math. I want to solve a math problem, maybe have the AI visualize it in some way, and I want to adapt it into code. So let's start off with Bard. So I gave Bard a trigonometry problem, and it solved it correctly. And then I asked Bard to visualize it, and it's a bit weird because it tried to say that there is an image of something. And if you look at other draft, you can try to see draft with code snippet. And this is also weird. Like, I'm not sure what's going on here. And if you look at the third one, it's also a bit weird as well. It doesn't really a correct visualization for the solution of the problem. And I tried to regenerate it a couple of times. It doesn't look good. So yeah, for visualization, Bard just cannot do it, just not for now. But it does solve the problem correctly though. So that's a plus. Then I asked Bard to convert to JavaScript code, and I realized that I would like to have a documentation in the code as well. So I asked for the JS doc, and Bard added in easily. So yeah, Bard is pretty good with code. So we're back in ChatGPT 4 again. I gave it the same trigonometry problem, and it answered correctly. with a good explanation. I ask it to visualize it for me, but it cannot do it. There might be some plugins that we could use, but for now, it cannot do it in the default model. We might go into more in-depth with math visualization using ChatGPT plugins in the future. And then I ask it to convert into JavaScript code. And again, I ask it to add in a JS doc to the code. The code is a bit different from BART, but it produced the same result, and it is a pretty good code. We're back in Bing again. I still use the creative mode just because I want to recreate the same talkative AI like ChatGPT or BART. And here I ask Bing the same trigonometry problem, and the response is some equation and reference to other sites that are not relevant to the question or the answer itself. And then I ask Bing to visualize it, and I got images of kite being stuck on a tree. And again, it's not relevant to the problem itself or the solution. And you can see that Bing used Dolly to generate these images. And like before, I asked Bing to convert solution into JavaScript with JSDoc, and the code is not correct. It's just some random code, I think. But there are documentation, just like I asked. Alright, to conclude this video, based on our tests, we can see that for planning, ChatGPT is the best since it is easier to talk to and it can give a pretty detailed plan, followed by BART and Bing. Then for research, Bing is the best because of its sources and how up-to-date it is compared to BART and ChatGPT. Finally, for math, I would say that ChatGPT tie with BART and Bing is pretty much not usable in this use case. So as you can see, these are just tools and each of them has their own use cases. If you enjoyed the video or found this to be helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe, and don't forget to click the bell. See you in the next video. Ciao!